Which takes me on to the New South Wales Chief Scientist report and the wonderful gas plant. If you read the report, and I know the way the report was presented was that everything will be okay and it can go ahead, but it isn't quite what the report says at all. It's not a particularly good report, and if you read all of the supporting reports for the report, some of those are brilliant. The one on human health was incredibly good. But what the Chief Scientist report does say that it can only go ahead if there are appropriate engineering and scientific solutions in place to manage storage, transport, reuse or disposal of produced water and salts. Well, obviously there isn't. So the idea that it can go ahead and that the report said it can go ahead is just a complete furphy. It's a lie, another lie. Professor Fell, who did one of the supporting reports, the Chief Scientist report, I think put it really beautifully when he said that it didn't matter even if you could treat this water. The real elephant in the room was, what do you do with the concentrate that you take out of the contaminated water? Where does that go? Well, unfortunately, at the moment, it's going to landfill, and that's basically council landfills that you and I pay for it. Next one. Number 3, which is the BTEX in flowback. And government and AGL throw their hands up and go, how did that happen? I can't imagine how that happened. Now, BTEX stands for benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene and xylene. They are a nasty bunch of chemicals, but obviously benzene is the worst. They've had their pilot project suspended, but why was it a surprise? We all know, we'd been certainly screaming loud and long to the government and all that would listen, that BTEX are a natural volatile organic compound within the coal. It's associated with groundwater that is around the coal seams. We knew that it was released via drilling, fracking. You can go to any standard literature, scientific literature on coal seam gas, and there will be a chapter on BTEX. It wasn't a surprise. They'd even found, Arrows Energy found BTEX in 5 out of 14 of their monitoring wells, right? And we all knew it's a contaminant of soil, groundwater, blood and air. So when the big surprise, BTEX was found, you know, call me cynical, but I really did wonder if this was like a staged process so that the government could come in and say, well, we're doing something about BTEX. Like a first-year chemistry student would know that BTEX would be in the flowback. Also, AGL's own gas treatment plant in, I hope I pronounce it correctly, Wallumbilla, they knew they put out 67 kilos of benzene every year until they closed down. So they knew it was associated. BTEX was banned in fracking fluids, but again, to me, that was a bit of a beat-up because I wasn't aware that it was used in fracking fluids. It's used in drilling fluids. So again, you know, these are things that were really strange. BTEX, why it's so serious, they're irritants, they can cause central nervous system problems. Chronic exposure can cause damage to the liver and kidneys and the blood system. And of course, benzene, as most people know, is a human carcinogen. It's linked to leukemia, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's an immunotoxic. It causes damage to the chromosomal systems, birth defects, sperm abnormalities. It's like the nasties of the nasties. So now I'm just going to set aside AGL for a little while because I don't want the companies to think that I only pick on AGL, so I thought I'd choose somebody else. One of the reasons I chose this one is AGL in New South Wales doesn't have to report to the National Pollutant Inventory because it's not big enough, but Santos does. And I thought I would just pop up some of these figures. We were in Sydney last week giving a similar presentation to some academics down there on air pollution. And I must admit, some of their eyes popped out of their sockets when they saw the level of pollution that the companies are reporting. Now remember, this is company data, they're estimates, they don't actually have to do the monitoring, and as they wrote the booklets that help them decide those estimates, I would suggest these are under you know, they're conservative figures. But still, if you look at those figures, they are significant. You know, 1,100 tonnes of volatile organic tons of volatile organic compounds in 1 year alone. Particulate matter carbon monoxide. These are all incredibly serious toxins. And I wrote that little at risk up there to remind me to just tell you that there is a push by the Abbott government to get rid of the National Pollutant Inventory. And as that was something that it took, I think, out of John and our lives about 5 years, we fought, like many others, to get a National Pollutant Inventory. All I can say is over my dead body it'll go. Anyway, next one. While a lot of the focus has been on hydraulic fracturing and how that's the big issue, again, it was a way of taking away from some of the serious other issues. And certainly you have air pollution whether you frack or not. Everything from the machinery and the vehicles and the flaring and the venting and the dehydration units, but very much so the compressors. The compressors are the big, big polluters. And if you look at QGC or British Gas, their 2 processing plants, again, look at those figures for particulate matter. And I'll explain a little while why that is so important. Nearly 2 million kilograms of particulate matter going out every year, along with lots of nitrous oxides, again, very serious toxins. And it's going up. QGC's processing plant in Kenya, the 211, 212 figures, 5,500 kilograms. 212, 213, 580,000 kilograms. That is a significant increase in 1 year. Yes, I don't think we could call it clean. Why I harp on a bit on about particulates at the moment is that there's a lot of work, a paper just came out, Brown et al., at the end of last year, talking about the synergy or the combined effect of particulates and other air pollutants. And why particulate matter is so important is that other chemicals capture onto those dust particles, and then you have a perfect way of getting those into the lungs, deep into the lungs. And because each little particulate matter has surface area, it means it carries so much more chemical into the lung than could get there if you had very low particulate matter in the air. And we know that the industry produces a lot of particulate, we've seen those results, and a lot of that is silica. Because when the industry says, when we frack, we pop down water and chemicals and sand, it's not sand as you and I know it, it's silica products. And certainly a year or so ago, the regulatory agencies in the States put out a fracking alert on silica because they were saying that the exposure to airborne silica among workers who do hydraulic fracturing was resulting in silicosis, lung cancer and a whole range of other issues, pulmonary and kidney disease. We've already seen some testing in Tara of dam water where we've picked up quite high levels of silica. These are preliminary results. We don't know if that's because there's definitely only because there's high silica in the soil or it's coming from dust, and a lot more work needs to be done, but those are quite serious levels. And diesel particulates, again, class 1 carcinogen, just as the WHO announced in 2013 that outdoor air pollution is carcinogenic. It does cause cancer. Oh, and can I just go back for a second? I love this photo. If you can just see the bottom photo and the number of crane sort of machinery, and that's just to dig one pipeline, just one single pipeline. Yep, next one. Particulates and naturally occurring radioactive materials are the other area that we are very, very concerned about. Now, you know, norms, we know, are in coal. It's always known. Their level is dependent on how old the coal seam is and the level of salinity in the coal seam, but they're always there. And things like radium and radon, both very serious contaminants. Radium particularly because it bioaccumulates, radon because it inhaled, it can cause lung cancer. And what we also know is that remobilised by drilling, fracking and the sort of earthworks I just showed you before. And a study in 2013, Tate et al. Showed that within the gas fields around the Tara region, there was a 3-fold increase in radon inside the gas fields as compared to outside the gas fields. Once it's remobilised, again, a little bit like the chemicals and the particulate matter, it gets relocated through that particle matter, or it can be resuspended in air, or it can be transferred through the wastewater. But once it's actually in the air, if you get particulate fallout and washout by rain, you have a very, very effective pathway of getting those norms into domestic water tanks. And we are already seeing alpha and beta radioactivity in what we would consider very young water tanks, in the sediment of the water tanks of people who are living near the gas fields. Interestingly, we're also picking up cesium-137, but that's a bit of a, the moment's a bit of a scientific nightmare about trying to track down the source of that. To show you how important the government takes this issue, when Santos was fined for contaminating the aquifer, the shallow aquifer, with uranium, they didn't even request testing for radionuclides. It was just quite extraordinary. Next one. Methane leaks, of course, is the other issue we're really concerned about, and I told you I'd get back to AGL. That same Tate and Orr paper showed that there was a threefold increase in methane concentrations inside the gas field compared to outside, with a significant relationship with the well numbers. And basically methane inside the gas field was around 6.89 parts per million. Outside it was less than 2 parts per million, quite significant. And one of the other things that this tells us, that if radon, carbon dioxide and methane are escaping through movement through the soil, not actually at the wellheads, but actually movement through the soil, then there's also possible release of other volatile organic compounds that we know are in the soil as well. Now, many of you would be aware that AGL has just been fined, I think it was a piddly 15,000, for a methane link. I think from memory it was something like 10,000 cubic feet, but don't quote me on that. Again, they just had a problem with one of their wells, bad luck. But there's also been a very big issue in Wallumbilla water supply, where for the first time they've been discovering methane there. And it just happens that AGL has a gas processing plant at Wallumbilla. Not that I would be making the connection, of course, never. And of course the poor Alconda Moines River continues to bubble along an 5-kilometre stretch. It's about 80% of the lower explosive level, which is quite a high level. And we know when Queensland government tested their gas wells, a number of them leaked methane. That was quite an old one. That happened in 2011, and they've been sensible. They've never tested any more. So, that's a good idea.